So the making of this album actually has a really interesting story. It was December 2019 when I decided to make this album. The month before, I'd actually took out a visa for New Zealand, and I was getting ready to go in September 2020. So there was a little bit of a time limit. I started deciding the songs out of songs that I had written over the past 3 years, whittled it down to 10 or 12, and I started working on the arrangements. So I started working on some drum scores. I started recording little bits of acoustic guitar with my Focusrite interface, just a 2-in, 2-out thing. I had this huge plan to have loads of musician friends and ex-students on this album. I was working with Phil, my drummer friend, in his studio, and then suddenly everything changed. As many people remember, back in 2020, March 2020, that's when COVID hit the news in the UK. There was a nationwide lockdown. It made it a lot more difficult to meet up with friends, and in this case, meet up with other musicians. But this is where it gets quite interesting. So I just moved to a 4-bedroom house, and I was sharing with 3 other people. And just as COVID hit the news, that's when I got ill. There was no way of really knowing at that time whether it was COVID or not, but I was pretty ill. But the people I was living with didn't see it that way. They got a little bit scared and they decided to flee for the hills. They all moved back home, and I was left alone in this 4-bedroom house with a garden, with a garage, for about 6 to 7 months. Instead of giving up, I figured, okay, I have a space, I'm all alone, this is a good opportunity. So I started taking stuff out of the garage, I started ripping their mattresses off of their beds, off of their empty beds. I started building vocal Booth Henge. Don't get me wrong, being alone in a 4-bedroom house with my balls out all day was a fantastic luxury. But as a lot of people know, there were a lot of challenges during COVID, especially if you're about to record an entire album yourself. I was beginning to realize what a mammoth task it was. It wasn't just recording a guitar part, it was arranging, it was practicing, it was learning the parts, it was writing the parts, it was dealing with insecurities and learning how to record. On top of that, as we all know, COVID was quite difficult for a lot of people. I had to find a way of keeping myself healthy and sane during that time, especially being alone. So in between all these different tasks and these musical ideas, I was practicing capoeira, I was keeping myself fit, I was cooking, I was reading, I was learning Spanish at the time as well. I tried to keep my habits as healthy as possible. Because after all, I am my art. My art is channeled through me. I have to be the best that I can be if I'm going to create the best possible music that I can create. I did develop a lot of unhealthy habits too. I tried to balance it out. I ate a lot of pizza. I built the Leaning Tower of Pisa while I was at home. I was eating a lot of takeaway in general. I was drinking a lot of rum. I was smoking more than I should have, considering the insecurities I had about my singing voice. But everything's about balance. I decided the best way to not go crazy was try and organize my recording schedule the best that I could. At the same time, I wanted to take advantage of the time that I had because we didn't know how long COVID was going to last. So I decided to do something every single day, whether it was record a part, or arrange a part, or write a part, or finish a song one day. It didn't matter what it was, as long as I did one thing every day towards the creation of this album. I have a diary that's absolutely full for about 6 months, between March and the end of August, with everything I did every day. I tried to separate the spaces. If I was going to record guitar, I did it in the kitchen. I recorded vocals in the garage. I edited in the living room. I slept in the bedroom and nothing else. I tried to create some diversity. On top of that, I factored in some days off as well to focus on other things, whether it was fitness or reading or whatever else, or simply relaxation. Let your head Like I said earlier, all of the songs started with the acoustic guitar and the voice. That's exactly how I began the recording process. I took the songs, I recorded the acoustic guitar, I DI'd it, direct injected it. Once I had the full song on the acoustic guitar recorded, that's when I started playing the other instruments. Apart from some of the ideas that I came up with before COVID, some of the basic backing vocal and drum ideas, most of the arranging was done by jamming along with the acoustic track after it was recorded. I jammed on my Schecter C7 and used my pedal board to come up with the guitar parts. I have my dad's 5-string bass and his mandolin. My good drummer friend, Paige, whom I lived with, she left her Yamaha keyboard in the house as well when she fled to her parents' house. So I took advantage of that. You can hear that on things like Melody Stay and High and The Tiger That Came Round for Tea. All of these instruments were direct injected via the interface into the computer. In terms of the style of the arrangements, every song already had its own style. You know, Melody Stay already had this Latin bossa nova style. Let It All Out was always a country pop song. Picking on Me with its aggression was a punky rock song even before I put the distortion on the electric guitar. The songs almost decided for themselves how they were going to sound. In between, I was going through my old CD collection. I was listening to things like Pantera, Supertramp, Queen, any of the bands that I loved as a kid, Chicoria, Pendulum, and typically when I was doing the arranging, when I was trying to work out the parts, I would come up with new sections. For example, the solo in The Girls I Used to Know, that was spontaneous, on the spot. I had to figure something out afterwards and edit the acoustic guitar track. High was meant to be a 40-second song, but it turned into 4 minutes. Admittedly, it was really exhausting trying to get through all of these songs and record all these different parts, you know, the bass part, the keys part, the guitar parts. It was a lot of stress. On top of that, you know, I had to write the parts, I had to practice the parts, and then I had to record the parts as perfect as I could and edit them afterwards to see if I'd actually done a good job. I decided to release a little bit of the pressure on myself by getting some other people involved. For example, Phil Minor, the drummer, he recorded in his home studio and sent the tracks back over to me after I'd gotten the arrangements done. Elias recorded some percussion at his house. You can hear him on Bong Song and High, for example, Melody Stay too. Me and Job had a fairly successful couple of sessions over Zoom, as you can see here. And towards the end, Gracie came over and recorded right here a vocal Booth Henge. The arranging with the instruments probably took up the majority of the time, all the way through March, April, May, June, and about midway through July. August was fast approaching and the vocals were probably the most difficult part for me. Like I said, I had a lot of insecurities about my vocals. I was practicing them nearly every day for the past few months to the point of absolute exhaustion. I tried to take rests in between, but the anxiety was a little bit too great for me to handle. I began recording little bits of vocals and backing vocals throughout. The grand majority of the vocals had to be recorded in August. I was trying to leave it last so that I had the best possible performance that I could have. On top of that, to add more pressure, I was moving out at the beginning of September, so the contract to the house was up. To record the vocals, I built this vocal booth out of all the mattresses off of people's beds. I found bits of wood and blankets in the garage and shelving units and all kinds of stuff, sofa cushions as well to dampen the sound. It worked out really well. Admittedly, the sound was a little bit muffled because it was very dead in that space. It was quite short as well. I had to spend the majority of the time squatting to get the vocals out. I borrowed this fantastic microphone. It was an NT2, a Rhodes NT2 condenser mic from my dad. It had this really crisp sound with this slight boost in the mids. I thought it sounded amazing. At the back of Vocal Booth Henge, there was this perfect little slot in the shelving unit where I had my computer and my interface. My computer was fairly silent at the time as well, so it made no difference. I could freely stop the recording and start it whenever I wanted. There were definitely some challenges. The garage door would actually rattle when I hit certain notes, so I had to put a whole bunch of crap against it to stop it from rattling. There's the sound of kids playing football and kicking the football against the fence. There are cars honking horns. There's this little bit where a car honks perfectly in time with some of the claps that I recorded on MTA. The landlord randomly came over to cut the grass at one point. The estate agent was sending visitors to see the house. I remember one time I received absolutely no warning, and this guy walks into the garage just as I'm screaming, picking on me in this little grotto that I built for myself in the garage. I have no idea what he thought. Towards the end, it became a bit of a danger to my health. The integrity of one of the mattresses had just gone. And it was almost leaning over, and there was wood balancing on top of it, and I really had to crouch to get the last few lyrics out. So finally I got everything done and it was time to move out. I didn't get the chance to edit everything, but the majority. I just decided to leave it for a while. What I needed was a break. Unfortunately, they'd closed the borders of New Zealand by this point, so I decided to take a 3-month trip to Europe. I really needed to get out of that house and interact with people. It was a great time. I went to Portugal, went to Italy, and inevitably after a while, COVID locked everything down again. I think I was in Milan when I listened to their album for the first time again in a while, and I realized how good everything sounded. It was really well recorded, really well edited. It just filled me with enthusiasm. I was ready to start this project up again and get it done. As soon as I got back, I talked to Stephen Adkins, and we had several sessions over the next year or so when everything opened back up again. In between, I was designing logos, I was filming a music video for Picking On Me and Melody Stay. There's a whole bunch of things going on in the background. These were quite big arrangements, as you'll hear on the actual album, so it took a little while to mix and master and to satisfy me. But finally we got there.